Part 2. Labour shortages and the battle for markets, English wine at a crossroads. In Part 1, we identified oversupply as the structural problem facing English wine. Part 2 must address how the industry attempts to sell its way out of it. The first constraint is labour. Making English wine remains unusually labour-intensive by international standards. The climatic variability of southern England and the relatively small average vineyard size mean mechanisation is limited. Seasonal hand harvesting remains common, tying production to the availability of short-term agricultural labour markets, increasingly shaped by visa rules, recruitment costs, and accommodation provision. Some highlight post-Brexit restrictions on EU labour mobility, saying this has pushed up employment costs, although this is across horticulture generally, more than wine production specifically. For smaller vineyards, this is not merely a margin issue, but an operational risk. Grapes cannot wait for labour shortages to resolve themselves. It is clear that the government can do more to help here, and it isn't helpful for them to continue to blame Brexit, when in reality they can focus their intention on helping individual industries. At the production end, traditional method sparkling wine increases financial exposure. The requirement to hold stock during secondary fermentation and aging means capital is tied up for years before a bottle can be sold. In a period of expanding output, this produces a double whammy. Producers must simultaneously service expansion-related debt while carrying increasing stock. The large 2023 harvest intensified this pressure, with some estates reportedly seeking private label or white label buyers simply to improve cash flow by moving wine still aging in storage. Pricing reflects these accumulated costs. Retail pricing of English sparkling wine often places it within touching distance of entry-level champagne. International buyers, including those surveyed in Central European markets, increasingly argue that English sparkling is priced around 10 to 15% above comparable traditional method wines once brand recognition is stripped out. This is not entirely irrational from their standpoint. As mentioned, smaller vineyard scale, lower yields, higher land prices, and UK excise duty all inflate the cost base. VAT, alcohol duty, employer national insurance contributions, and packaging compliance costs can account for close to half of the final retail price of a domestically sold bottle. This leaves producers in a strategic impasse. They cannot compete with imported wines on price in supermarket environments, yet must compete with them on the same shelf. Attempts to enter lower price segments risk eroding the premium positioning upon which long-run profitability depends. As a result, some producers have begun exploring alternative sparkling production methods, such as char mat or carbonation, in order to create entry-level products at lower retail price points. Whether this can be achieved without damaging the perceived quality hierarchy of English sparkling remains uncertain. Export offers an apparent solution and are needed, but this introduces its own bureaucracy. Unlike major wine-producing nations within the European Union, English wine exporters must navigate additional certification, labelling and logistics requirements when accessing overseas markets. Exporting ALC OHOL requires compliance with origin rules, analytical certification, and importer-specific documentation regimes. For small producers, the administrative burden and marketing cost of establishing brand identity abroad can prevent them trying. Trade estimates suggest that building international brand recognition at scale may require sustained marketing expenditure measured in the millions annually over a decade. Many of the key European markets on which English wine producers want to sell into are themselves trade dependent and operate comfortably in English as a commercial language. However, these markets will not wait for English producers to overcome domestic administrative delays. Current regulatory and bureaucratic burdens risk placing English vineyards at a structural disadvantage in fast-moving export environments. EU markets quite happily buy Australian and New Zealand wines, and in part that has to be down to fluid and established export processes. There is therefore a clear role for government in reviewing and streamlining these processes to ensure producers can compete effectively. Similar considerations apply to labour supply frameworks, where targeted, sector-specific adaptations may be required to reduce friction and ensure that workforce access aligns with the operational realities of a seasonal, export-oriented industry. Consequently, many estates have turned toward wine tourism and hospitality experiences as supplementary revenue streams. Vineyard tours, tasting rooms, restaurant partnerships, and corporate events are increasingly viewed not simply as marketing tools, but as essential components of business viability. Direct-to-consumer sales improve margins and provide insulation against a retail price competition, particularly as consumers demonstrate greater willingness to purchase locally produced goods within experiential settings. Looking ahead, consolidation appears likely. Rising plantings, falling grape prices, and persistent stock levels will place downward pressure on weaker balance sheets. Mergers, acquisitions, and market exits may allow surviving firms to achieve economies of scale, otherwise unavailable within fragmented ownership structures. Larger producers may pursue export growth, while smaller estates increasingly specialize in local tourism and niche still wine production. Whether the future is bright depends less on the quality of the wine produced, but more on market coordination and good government leadership. This is because English sparkling wine has proven its technical quality. Its long-term sustainability will depend on labour availability, government taxation and supportive policies, simplifying export paperwork, and the industry's capacity to avoid competing solely on price in an increasingly crowded premium wine market.